let's just say that this is a pretty highly requested video. That's right, it's finally time to tackle the last video of this series! Sort of. Ruby and Sapphire were actually the first Pokemon games I ever played, so this is gonna be a real treat for me personally, comparing them to the newer versions. If you've watched the other two remake videos, then you're probably familiar with this already, but this video is gonna focus on how Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire differ to the original Ruby and Sapphire. While I will also compare the two remakes to each other, for fear of sounding like a broken record, I'm not going to cover everything that also applies to the originals, so I would definitely recommend going back and watching the video solely covering Gen 3 to better understand this video. So, like the other two remake videos, we have what I call the inevitable changes. This is a bunch of stuff that just comes with the move to the 3DS and using the Generation 6 engine. It's natural that with an improved system, the way the game runs, looks, and sounds is different. A few of these changes were also covered in the previous two remake videos, so again, to save on babble, I'll try and go over them as fast as I can. This includes stuff like the physical special move split, Pokemon characteristics, or the fact that the whole game is now laid out across two screens. Game Freak really did try and take advantage of the new system to really show off the Hoenn region. There are lots of areas at all sorts of angles, and a lot of the cutscenes just generally feel a lot more cinematic than they did before. ORAS takes after X and Y in a lot of ways. For example, going in favor of illustrations for the versus screens instead of sprites. O-Power's return, lots of new items from previous generations make their first appearance in Hoenn, and the TM list is also the same as X and Y's with the exception of Hidden Power. And since Gen 5, TMs now have infinite uses! There's a huge 267 new moves to mess around with too. The shiny odds have been sliced in half from the original Ruby and Sapphire, and then there's more methods inherited from previous games, like fish chaining and Mizuta method. Breeding mechanics are also passed on from X and Y. Another thing new from Kalos is the fairy type, with some of Hoenn's own Pokemon retyped to reflect this. A couple of examples would be the Roltzine and Mauville. Horde, Triple, and Rotation battles are battle formats that are new to the region. The returning day and night cycle now lets you see Hoenn in an entirely new light. I live for bad jokes, but being real, these visuals are gorgeous. Pretty much every character was redesigned in some way for ORAS. This includes gym leaders, minor characters, trainers, and of course the playable characters. They did stay pretty close to the original designs, but nevertheless they are quite distinguishable from the originals, mostly because they're so freaking tall. But now we're on to the actual version differences. Let's go! Ooh, I wrote that in my script, but I didn't mean to do that. Normally I'd talk about how the intros are totally different, but this time they really stayed true to the originals. Replacing the double battle segment of the originals is now a segment showcasing Mega Evolution and some major characters. The title screen is pretty much the same as the originals, but instead shows the cover legendaries in their primal forms. The actual in-game intro has the same sort of feel to it, but it's a lot more cinematic. They even use the original graphics at the beginning, and I screamed on the inside. And a little bit on the outside. First time I saw it. The credits are also now a mixture of the original bike scene and now a new visual with the Hoenn map. The music changes to represent different parts of your journey in Hoenn, and it's so cute. In the main story, ORAS didn't actually make any changes to the version exclusive Pokemon. After the main story is a different matter though. For Omega Ruby you've got the Kabuto, Shieldon, West Seashellos, Archon and Sprout lines, as well as Ho-Oh, Palkia, Throw, Tornadus, and Reshiram. Alpha Sapphire has the Omanite, Cranidos, East Seashellos, Tortuga and Clauncher lines, as well as Lugia, Dialga, Sork, Thundurus, and Zekrom. Like Heart Gold and Soul Silver, ORAS mostly left the regional decks alone, but did add in some of the Sinnoh evolutions to Pokemon that already existed in Ruby and Sapphire. Pokemon distributions around Hoenn are mostly the same, under normal circumstances, with the odd change here and there. A couple of examples being that you can't find some evolved Pokemon like Manectric or Wailord in the wild anymore. Other evolved Pokemon are now available in some areas though, like Gloom being more widespread, and Celio in Shoal Cave. Like the other two sets of remakes, post-game a lot more Pokemon are available. They went crazy with these games though. Game Freak wanted players to be able to get a complete Pokedex using only the Gen 6 games, so they crammed every Pokemon not available in X and Y into ORAS. Pokemon outside of Hoenn's regional decks are accessible after the events at the Cave of Origin. Pretty much all of the legendaries are available in ORAS. We'll go into how you get these Pokemon in a bit more depth later in the video though. The first 3 times you beat the Elite Four, you get to choose a starter from Gens 2, 4, and 5. There's now a Spiritomb encounter, and in the post-game, you get a Togepi egg from the same woman in Laveridge Town. Oh, and did I mention you can catch Deoxys now? In-game? Just throwing it out there. Speaking of Deoxys, you may recall that in Generation 3, the different forms were split up between the Gen 3 games. Well, now you can change Deoxys' form whenever you want, using a special rock in Professor Cosmo's house. Deoxys is only the beginning of the new forms though. All Mega Evolutions return from X and Y, and you've got a whole bunch of new Megas exclusive to these games. Then there's also the Primal forms, which are basically just Megas, but better. And lastly, we have the 6 new cosplay Pikachu forms. For storyline changes, there's a ton to go over. Game Freak meddled with the story here a lot more than they did in previous remakes. One of the biggest changes would be the way Mega Evolution was implemented. They made it a major part of the story, with Steven taking on the role of the character that introduces you to Mega Evolution and gives you the bracelet. It's discussed by a lot of other characters and it really changes the way a lot of major battles play out, since your rival, Steven and Wally all have keystones. After you obtain the Surf HM and talk to Steven, one of the Eon duo will appear and take you to Southern Island, where you battle against Team Magma or Aqua to protect the other Eon Pokemon. After this is completed, it then just joins your team. Yep, only 5 badges in and you just get given a legendary. The climax of the main story is essentially the same, with you just having to calm down Groudon or Kyogre. Except they get a bit too excited and revert back to their primal forms. And you have to catch them like that. It's actually quite difficult. Pretty much all of the returning characters are expanded on and have new lines of dialogue, so you learn more about them and their motivations than before. I'd say this is most apparent with the evil teams and your rival. Your rival plays a much more meaningful role than before and interacts with you a lot more throughout the story, with an all-new final battle against them taking place after the credits. Wally's role is pretty much the same, but somehow he's even more precious. His final battle is a much bigger deal than it was in the originals. He swapped out Gardevoir for Mega Gallade and the visuals are crazy beautiful. And that's not even mentioning the music. Holy. The evil team admins were all given drastic redesigns and are far more defined characters than before. Sometimes they appear at different places in the story than they did before too. Shelly is very different, but whoa. Matt is, big. Courtney's a robot, and Tabitha is... There are also some new characters. Lycia is Wallace's niece, who is a contest celebrity and acts as a gateway for this feature when you get to Slateport. Arun, Hoen's new expert on secret bases, first appears on Route 111 but resides in Fortree City, where you can battle him or get rewards for collecting flags. And then there's Zinnia, which is a great segue to start talking about ORS's flagship new feature, the Delta episode. This is a post-game episode with an all-new plot that leads you all around Hoenn in an effort to save the world. Again. It picks up right after you beat the League for the first time. Hitting a little too hard to home by showcasing your parents' failing marriage. Surprise, surprise, your dad's too busy with work, so woo, looks like you got yourself some tickets for the meteor shower. Meteors are pretty neat, except now there's a massive one on a collision course with Earth, and everyone's gonna die. Oh no. Then we get our first real glimpse of Zinnia, who was actually disguised as a grunt at certain points in the game. You ain't sneaky, I got your number. But Zinnia is a grunt turned thief because now she's stealing everyone's keystones. There's a cutscene where Mr. Stone talks about infinity energy, and I can't remember most of it. You then head off to Granite Cave to get a meteorite shard and end up battling Zinnia there because why not? You give the shard to the people at the Space Center where they reveal their plan to save the planet is to create a warp hole and let the Meteor of Death be some other universe's problem. Zinnia's like, no, you shouldn't do that. And they're like, no, we're gonna do it anyway. Lucy, go to Meteor Falls and get us another meteor shard. So you go there, get the shard, talk to an elderly woman who seems particularly fond of Steven. Turns out she is a descendant of the ancient Draconid people who are tasked with passing down the law of Mega Evolution and Lord Rayquaza. Zinnia is actually the lawkeeper of the Draconids. Then Team Magma or Aqua show up again like, we're still relevant, I promise. And steal the Dimensional Shifter, an important device that they need to make the warp hole. Not that it matters because Zinnia just breaks it anyway. You team up against them with Steven and follow Zinnia over to the Lily Cove hideout. She manages to win and steal the keystone she needs, but you get a free Megastone out of it, so it's not all that bad. You're then told to find Wallace, who whisks you away to Sky Pillar and battles you to test your worth. As you go up Sky Pillar, Zinnia will tell you about the history of Mega Evolution and Rayquaza. You get to the Dragonhawk altar and Zinnia starts getting personal. In the morning, Zinnia summons Rayquaza, tries and fails to get it to Mega Evolve. Rayquaza then eats the meteorite that you got from Mount Chimney and is all good to go. You catch it, battle Zinnia again, and set off for an adventure in space. You destroy the meteor, the day is saved, when suddenly... a triangle. Wait, I've seen that triangle before. So Deoxys is now catchable in-game.
So that's against the rules, and you can't sit with us. Whatever. Those rules aren't real. You can't sit with us!
He's been kicked out of the mythical club, but it was totally worth it just to hear this music again. Except I accidentally one-shot it, so I didn't get to hear it for very long. It's okay though, since you can rebattle it later anyway. And that's it. Zinnia left a note behind, and after that there's cutscenes of everyone and you on a date with your rival. I ship it. So now with the storyline stuff out of the way, we're going to take a look at some features that were changed from Ruby and Sapphire. The Pokenav, for example, is completely different to Gen 3's. Previously a menu option, the Pokenav Plus now takes up the entirety of the bottom screen. It's split up into 4 main divisions. The Playnav is basically just the bottom screen from X and Y, so you got Super Training, Pokemon and Me, and of course the PSS. But this time it's got new icons. There's the Area Nav, which is like the map feature, but way better. It has place descriptions, Pokemon distributions, Trainer's Eye, Secret Base, and even berry locations all built into it. Then there's the Dex Nav, which allows you to seek out specific Pokemon. The more Pokemon of the same species you find, the higher chance you have of getting that Pokemon with certain egg moves, hidden abilities, higher levels, better IVs, and even the chance to be shiny. As you catch all the Pokemon in the area, you also get these cute little crowns on top. And lastly, there's the Buzz Nav, which is like a constant news show except all they ever talk about is you. It's kinda creepy. BuzzNav is also the hub for Street Pass, where you can get a bunch of cool stuff that we'll talk about more in a bit. Secret bases are now super secret bases. The new character Arun serves as a gateway to this feature when you enter the upper section of Route 111 for the first time. There's a much larger selection of decorations to pick from too. Instead of mixing records, you now get your friends' secret bases to appear by Street Pass or by scanning in a QR code. And like the originals, the base will appear in your game too. Do you remember the house in Moz Deep City with the mysterious door? Well, in Ruby and Sapphire, if you scanned in e-reader trainers, you'd be able to battle them in there. But in Oras, if you scan in a special QR code, like Junichi Masuda's or Shigeru Omori's, then their secret base will appear behind the door. Like Gen 4's secret bases, you can capture the flag of another base and gradually increase your rank. You can also recruit other base owners to be a secret pal in your base. Once a day, you can battle a secret pal or have them perform a special skill. What skills they can perform depends on the trainer class and your rank, but there's a wide range of cool stuff like O powers, items, berries, and EV increases. Pokemon contests are back! As you would expect, they're a little different though. They're now called Pokemon Contest Spectaculars, because now when you fill up the meter all the way, your Pokemon performs a spectacular talent that matches with its type. And let me just say that spectacular talents give me heavy vibes of Z moves. You can also Mega Evolve a Pokemon during one of these, and it'll stay Mega Evolved for the rest of the contest. You can now take pictures during contests, and if you talk to the guy outside, then you can use the 3DS camera display as a contest background. Pokeblocks are still the way that you increase your Pokemon stats, but now you make them automatically using the Pokeblock kit. You select 4 different berries, and it spits out 4 Pokeblocks. There are the regular ones and the plus ones, which have jelly beans in them. The Berry Blender minigame is gone, which makes me sad, but Oras decides to keep them in the contest hall to torment you. The Sheen Star is also gone, so now there's no limit to how many Pokeblocks you can cram into your Pokemon's poor little mouth. This means that you can potentially have a Pokemon with max stats. You now only get ribbons and paintings in the main hall for clearing the Master Rank, and if you have a Pokemon that has cleared the Master Rank in all 5 categories, then it'll play a special animation when you send it out into battle. After the contest has ended, there'll be audience members waiting outside the entrance that'll give you items. The higher the rank, the better items you'll get. And then there's Lycia, of course. As I said before, she essentially acts as a gateway to contests. She's the one that gives you the contest pass and the idol costume that you have to wear, and she appears in the dressing room after a few different milestones. There's this little side story about her rivalry with this guy called Chaz and his cute Machoke. Once you beat the Master Rank for every category, Lycia will appear in the Master Rank. The talent round is very rigged toward her, so good luck. You'll need it. Trick House! For whatever reason, Oras's Trick House only has 6 puzzles instead of Gen 3's 8, but all of them bar Puzzle 5 are totally different to the original, so at least it's a nice change in pace. In Gen 3, you needed to have gym badges to unlock each puzzle, but this time you can access them whenever. Not that you'll get too far since some of them require HM moves though. Little things like hiding places and a couple of the prizes were changed, but the most disappointing thing that they changed for me was the removal of the Trickmaster is my life password. The Safari Zone has also changed. Don't get excited though, it kinda sucks. You can still find all the same Pokemon there, but the actual Safari game itself is now gone because the owner went bankrupt or something. If you thought that was bad though. Let's see what happened to the game corner. It's gone! Not even any attempt to adapt it like Johto's. Nope, it's just shut down. And know what else is gone? Swarms! An all-new feature in Oras would be soaring. You get the Eon Flute after the whole weather crisis is over, and you can use it to summon Latias or Latios at any time, even if they're in the PC box. It doesn't make sense, but don't question it. They mega evolve during this, and you can fly around on them over the whole Hoenn region and land wherever you want. Definitely haven't seen this before. In the sky, you can encounter Pokemon and find mirage spots, secret areas that contain a lot of Pokemon not found anywhere else, and pretty much every legendary Pokemon that isn't an X and Y. Speaking of mirages, Mirage Island isn't in the game anymore. I'm sad. But what about areas? How is the region of Hoenn different? The graphical jump between Gen 3 and 6 is huge. Since they essentially rebuilt Hoenn for the 3DS, everything looks different, so I'm not going to cover the changes down to every tile or every patch of grass, but do more of a general analysis. It's still probably going to be way too long though. Sorry. Anyway, starting off with Rustboro City. Pretty much the same. There's an extra house here and a few others have been moved around. They moved around the houses and stuff in Dewford too. And then there's Granite Cave. The lower levels are more or less the same, except the cracked tiles have been removed. The upper floor though is pretty different. You used to have to go through the whole cave to get to Steven's room on the first floor, but in Oras, Steven's room is gone. Or, well, it's at the other side of the cave, and it's accessible right from the entrance. Kinda makes the rest of the cave a bit pointless, especially seeing as now you can't even get to the lower floors until you have the Mach Bike. You can't actually get to Steven's room until you get the Knuckle Badge though, since a bunch of Ruin Maniacs will be blocking the entrance. I know that you did need the Knuckle Badge to use Splash on the lower floors in the originals, but I never did. I'd just walk around in the dark until I found my way. But Steven's new room is way cooler anyway. It's got all these ancient paintings, and delivering the letter now turns into this massive cutscene where you start to learn about Primal Reversion. Route 109 looks the same, except now there's actually a board to walk on when you get off the boat. In the original Slateport City, the area around the lighthouse was a lot more squashed together, but in Oras everything is a lot more spaced out. And then Mauville City. And let me just say, if you've only played Generation 3 Hoenn, then this place can be a little bit terrifying. I guess ever since Gen 5, they've decided that every game needs a city that's absolutely enormous. And for Hoenn, that's definitely Mauville. The first floor is styled like a mall, with shops as far as the eye can see. Let's go through them. Crooner's Cafe. Mauville Game Corner. Narcissus Mirror Shop. I see what you did there. And I like it. Ritzy Ribbon Retail, Poke Mileage Center, Reflexology Services, Battle Institute, Inverse Battle Shop, Ultimate Move Studio, Pledge Move Dojo, Song and Sword Move Academy, except the guy running that one is always in Crooner's Cafe. Then there's Mauville Food Court, which works pretty similarly to some of the restaurants in Kalos. This new building is Mauville TV, which is where they film all the stuff for BuzzNav. There's an outside portion of the first floor with the Pokemon Center and Mart, with a miniature model of Prism Tower in the middle because, in-game, Watson took inspiration from Kalos' Lumio City when remodeling Mauville. On the second floor is Mauville Hills, which you can only access after you start the new Mauville side quest. It's a bunch of luxury apartments that have some really cool tenants, like Ribbon Belle. She likes ribbons. There's Rock Smash Guy. Though, since in Oras Wally's uncle gives you Rock Smash, he's now just reciting his Rock Smash dialogue all day, but with no one to give it to. What a sad existence. There's man who likes to watch the corridor. This guy who is getting evicted because he didn't pay his rent. And this woman who bought an apartment next to a musician that she was a fan of to stalk him. Don't do that. The third floor is a rooftop area with a bunch of NPCs. Far too relatable NPCs. I feel personally targeted by this. After the Delta episode, you can even see Winona chilling here. Watson doesn't ask you to turn off New Mauville's generator until after the main story now, but when you do access, you'll notice that it's a lot smaller than the originals. Mount Chimney now has this big glass platform for the meteorite machine, which is a horrible idea, because who wants to look down and see a lake of fiery death?
Don't look down.
Okay, look down. Look down. Come on, move. Don't look down. Don't look down. Check! I'm looking down! Ah!
There's also a sneaky little side path that leads you to the TM for Incinerate. The lower part of Route 114 and the upper part of Route 115 have these massive craters, which makes sense seeing as it's right outside Meteor Falls. The end of Route 119 is also quite a bit shorter than the new originals. There's now a hidden area behind Fortree Gym where you get the TM for Grassknot, and the decoration shop is replaced by the secret base Guild, where you can battle Arun. Scorched Slab used to be a one-room cave where you got Sunny Day, but in ORAS it's huge and has 4 floors. You can even find Heatran here in the post-game. The end of Route 121 now has the super tall grass, when it only had the regular kind before. Mount Pyre is pretty different. The first 3 floors are way bigger than before, but that's because there are only 4 floors in total instead of Ruby and Sapphire's 6. There are now a bunch of trainers on the first floor when there weren't any in Gen 3. The exit to Outer Mount Pyre is now on the 3rd floor instead of the 1st, and the 4th floor is a man planning out his own burial. It's kinda weird. In the Lily Cove Museum, some of the art has been moved around and pretty much all of the paintings are different to how they were in the originals, and there's more slots for your own paintings too. The Lily Cove hideout has a completely different layout to the original, and is drastically different between Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. There's now a super long entrance section and a bunch of new rooms with some interesting lore if you look for it. Shoal Cave is pretty much the same, except this one room now has a strength boulder and some bike slopes. I'm not going to cover them all individually because that would take far too long, but even though the water routes all still follow the same general path, they've been restructured and are far more linear than they were in Ruby and Sapphire. The original water routes have hundreds of these little rocks lining the edge of the route, making a lot of the paths curved and quite hard to traverse if you haven't played the game before. But in ORAS, everything's a lot more blocky and it's really obvious where you need to go. Again, not covering all of them individually so I don't bore you, but the underwater sections of these routes look pretty different too, and there are now trainers there to battle. The abandoned ship has been replaced by Sea Mauville, which is more or less the same concept-wise, but the interior is completely different. In ORAS, the ship is like New Mauville, an old abandoned project, though it seems that Sea Mauville was cancelled because they treated their workforce horribly. Just look at this stuff. Sea Mauville's 10 slogans for a cheerful and fun workplace. Number 7. Maintain top quality. Give up your sanity. Number 8. Worship and praise the founder. Number 9. Don't expect time off before you retire. Number 10. No need to think, just work unceasingly. There's also a lot more lore to be found around the ship if you look for it. Lovely little tidbits like letters documenting the breakdown of Professor Cosmo's parents' marriage. Jeez. Game Freak really didn't hold back any punches, did they? The Spiritomb encounter I talked about before takes place here too. The scanner can still be found here, but instead of getting one of Clamperl's trade items, Stern will either give you the Clear Bell or the Tidal Bell, which you then take back to Sea Mauville to find Ho-Oh or Lugia. The Deep Sea Tooth and Deep Sea Scale can now be found a bunch of other ways instead. Moss Deep City has an extra house and an extended area near the Space Center. The Space Center itself is way fancier, but that makes sense seeing as you go there a lot in the Delta episode. Seafloor Cavern is more or less the same until you get to Room 5. Room 5 and 6's water puzzles are different this time, and the next 2 puzzle rooms are also different. You don't need Rock Smash to navigate it anymore either. The final room with Groudon and Kyogre at the bottom is now split off into 2 separate rooms. Sutopolis City? That's the same, except the center with the Cave of Origin is super fancy and has this massive tree planted by AZ. The Cave of Origin's floors are set out differently, and then when you get to the bottom, you'll need to ride on Groudon or Kyogre to make it to the deepest part of the cave. Or you could just use the side path, but that's not available until afterwards, so... Victory Road is unrecognizable from Ruby and Sapphire. There's this fancy new entrance and the main body of the cave only has 2 floors, with a couple of exits that lead back out into Evergrande City. One of these exits is where you get TM Psychic, which is pretty cool. At the end of the cave, there are 2 new rooms, the second one being where you battle Wooly. The Pokemon League building itself looks a little different, but that is nothing in comparison to the interior. Every Elite Four room now has a bridge before it, and they all look so good it can't be legal. Right, so you know how I said Victory Road is unrecognizable? Well, Sky Pillar is something else. I can't really compare the two because they are 2 totally different places. Something I can compare is the music though. In Ruby and Sapphire, Sky Pillar shares its theme with Mount Chimney, but take a listen to ORAS's version. I've heard this before. Yep, they remastered the music from the Rayquaza cutscene in Emerald and put it here. And finally, there's SS Tidal. It's not technically an area, but who cares? The cabins and storage area are mostly the same, but now a bunch of the trainers on board use Pokemon outside of the Hoenn decks. There's now also a deck area where Drake likes to chill. But now, new areas! Now behind the Berry Master's house in Route 123 is a totally new area full of berries belonging to the Berry Master. Who cares though, they're yours now. Battle Resort. The Battle Resort is a new settlement in the same place as the Battle Tower was in Ruby and Sapphire. There are move tutors here, as well as the stat judge and another daycare. And then there's just the Battle Maison, copy and pasted from X and Y. The lobby of the Battle Maison is also where the Wally rematches take place. The Battle Resort is also where Looker makes his compulsory appearance, except he's washed up on the beach and has a bad case of amnesia. It's been nearly 4 years since ORAS came out, and I still don't fully get what happened there. There's also a little more development with the evil teams here, the main point of interest being the grunt couple in one of the cabins. I do still wonder if this has anything to do with the grunt couple in Black and White too. After it's all sorted out, they give you their Camerupt and Sharpedo. There are a few new locations made for secret bases too. This would include Secret Islet, Meadow, and Shore, which you can only get to by diving or flying. There are also some new secret base locations in other places in Hoenn, such as Fiery Path or Route 117. There are also the Mirage spots all over Hoenn that you can only access by soaring. You've got Mirage Islands, caves, forests, mountains, and even some where you can find legendaries. But now it's time for all the really random changes that I don't know what to do with. I mean, miscellaneous changes. Yeah, that's what I meant. Alright, so this point isn't exactly an individual point as much as an observation, but ORAS felt a lot more handholdy than Ruby and Sapphire did. Characters constantly telling you where to go, asking to warp you everywhere because they're worried you can't find your way back. The returning experience share functionality from X and Y does make for a much easier experience on the whole, but you can turn it on and off when you want, so it didn't really bother me too much. But even just other little things that I've mentioned in this video, like taking away the berry blender, casually getting a legendary for free mid-game, and how much more linear and blocky the water routes are. But then on the other hand, something about the general feel of these games that I much prefer to Ruby and Sapphire is how stealth-aware they are. When I was replaying Omega Ruby for this video, I completely lost it more times than I could keep count with all the quotes that the NPCs were spitting out. And even aside from amazing NPC dialogue, there's so much more lore to be found in these games, and I'm a huge fan of that. That is another point though. Like every remake so far, a lot of NPCs and their dialogue are different. Likewise for teams and movesets for a lot of trainers, even significant ones like gym leaders. A lot of item placements around Hoenn have changed too. An example of this is that there are now Megastones scattered all around Hoenn for you to find. A couple of their locations differ between versions, like the Megastones of the EON duo for example. As would be expected, the pickup mechanics have changed a lot since Ruby and Sapphire. They're now level-based, and the selection of items is pretty much the same as X and Y's, but with Destiny knots instead of Prism scales. A selection of items can now also be found through Rock Smash. I said before how O-powers make a return, right? Well, this time they're tied into the old guys that appear in Mauville's Pokemon Center. In Gen 3, only one of these guys would appear in your game, which one you got depended on your trainer ID, but you could see the others by mixing records. This time, all of them appear as you progress through the story. They more or less have the same function in ORAS, but after you interact with them, they'll give you an O-power. And then when you've interacted with the last man, the storyteller, you go back to their apartment and they fuse with the powerless man in this creepy ritual and form Mr. Bonding! It's bonding time. Surprisingly, they didn't change any of the in-game trades. Well, a couple of details like the held items and natures are different, but that's just nitpicking. Game Freak have been messing around with the catch rates of legendaries since Black and White, and ORAS is no exception. Rayquaza's, for example, is now reduced from 3 to 45, which, if you don't understand catch rates, it's fine. But some other Pokemon with a catch rate of 45 would be Tangela, Eevee, Quillfish. The higher the catch rate, the easier the Pokemon is to catch, and 45 is very high for a legendary. You might as well just quick ball it and you'll probably catch it. A lot of people do seem to think that they did this because you have to battle Deoxys right afterward, but still, really? It wasn't just Rayquaza though. Groudon and Kyogre originally had catch rates of 5, which are now 3. Dialga, Palkia, Zekrom, and Reshiram also have this new catch rate. Something else Game Freak have liked to mess around with since Gen 5 would be Shiny Locks, which is basically when a Pokemon is coded to never appear shiny. Auras's new shiny locks would be all of the Weather Trio, Deoxys, Cosplay Pikachu, and one more which I actually do like. They shiny locked the Poochyena in the battle tutorial. Doesn't seem like a big deal, but for anyone who tried to shiny hunt the starters in the original games, the Poochyena could, and likely would, be shiny. So I guess shiny hunters these days don't have that to worry about. Obviously all of the areas look different, but with the gyms, they really went all out. Not only have a lot of their visual themes changed, but the navigation in most of them is different too. Rust Burrows is pretty similar though. The front is now a museum, but the main part of the gym isn't that different. Dewford's now has you move on a conveyor belt through the gym. There are light switches that temporarily light up the area, and you have to navigate it blind. At the end is Brawly, and like in Gen 3, the whole gym lights up when you beat him. Mauville Gym is more or less the same concept, but it now has 2 floors and different red and blue switches to work out. The Labyrinth Gym also has a similar concept to Gen 3's, but with trapdoors, a hot spring at the bottom, and a different layout puzzle to figure out. Petalburg Gym is pretty much identical to Ruby and Sapphire's. Fortree Gym, again, same concept, different layout. Mossdeep Gym, however, is probably the most different out of all of them. It doesn't look like Ruby and Sapphire's or Emerald's, instead going with a new layout with mysterious floating platforms. And finally, Sutopolis Gym. Same concept, device tiles, different puzzle. Some of the gym leaders now give out different TMs from the originals. Like in Ruby and Sapphire, there are no gym leader rematches, but there are Elite Four and Steven rematches. They now have different teams the second battle onward. A lot of trainer classes return from Ruby and Sapphire, but there are some new ones from Gens 5 and 6, like Backpacker and Fairy Tail Girl, and even some that are completely new to Oras, like Delinquent and Scuba Diver. Trainers that rematch you now have stronger teams depending on your progress in the main story, and some even have a chance to give you an item after you win. Lily Cove Department Store itself didn't change enough for me to mention it in the areas section, but their selection of available items has changed quite a bit, and the clearance sale now happens every Saturday. This and Floor 6 have a lot more decorations to pick from since they added a bunch more for super secret bases. The lottery is also a bit kinder and gives you a prize if you get 1 digit now. In quite a few places you can find unbought merchandise of these new characters called the Hoenn Rangers. Apparently they were a group of superheroes created by Mauville TV, but they didn't catch on because contests were too popular. That makes sense. Pokemon Centers only have 1 floor in Oras. In Gen 3 they had 2, the second floor having the cable and wireless clubs. But since in Gen 6 communication features are built into the PSS, they don't need the second floor anymore. Events. So to be fair, the only real events Ruby and Sapphire had that were accessible to everyone were the EON TICKET and other e-reader card stuff. But the e-reader is long gone, and the only thing to really survive into Oras is an altered version of the EON TICKET. It still serves the same purpose, allowing you to catch the EON Pokemon that you don't already have, but this event is interesting in that it was spread almost entirely by Street Pass, and there were of course plenty of Wi-Fi events to download the first year or 2 after the games came out. There were also quite a few events available through Pokemon Bank. Pokemon Bank is basically a 3DS version of Pokemon Box, even Bridgette's still there. It's also connected to another app called Pokemon Transporter, which allows you to transfer Pokemon from Gen 5. The Pokedex. Outwardly, the Pokedex has a different design, with it now being redesigned to resemble the original Game Boy Advance, which is a pretty nice homage considering the original was designed after the SP. Surprisingly, the interface is extremely similar to Gen 3's, but with some of the core features changed around. Footprints are gone, and size is gone from the main menu, but there is a button on the main display that shows the size comparison for every Pokemon going on a sort of conveyor belt. I never knew that until now, but that's so cool, jeez. You can also play the animations for each Pokemon, and entries can be viewed in different languages if you have a Pokemon originating from certain countries. Oras has the extra PC functionality from previous games, but where it really differs to the originals would be special wallpapers. Ruby and Sapphire's were really cool, but Oras's are just... Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of new items do appear in Hoenn, but a lot are also missing. For example, there's no mail in these games, and of course the e-reader berries don't come back since the e-reader was a Game Boy Advance peripheral. And while the running shoes were never a traditional item, you don't get given them anymore and you just start the game already wearing them. Trainer cards are single-sided now, but they have the badge display from previous games. The bag was inevitably redesigned, but the core functions aren't much different. The Pokeball pocket is gone, which makes me sad, but the fact that you've got unlimited space now more than makes up for it. The summary is also inbuilt into the bag for convenience when you're using TMs and stuff. You can fly to routes now, and when surfing, Whalmer, Sharpedo, and Kyogre all have unique models. Kyogre's faster than Whalmer, and Sharpedo is faster again, but you can't fish on it. Feebas now has 2 ways to evolve in this game because they kept the Prism scale from Gen 5. Remember in Gen 3, Feebas's encounter tiles were connected to the Trendy House? Well, the Trendy House is still there, but now Feebas has a flat 5% encounter rate on the whole route, and a 100% encounter rate under the bridge and by this rock during day and night respectively. Back in my day, we'd search for days trying to find that Feebas tile. The Kecleon spots have changed quite a bit too, with some of them in places that you wouldn't expect, like in the Space Center or the Hot Springs. So now I'm gonna have a quick ramble about Regigigas. I said before how a bunch of legendaries are available in Hoenn, right? Well, like Heatran, Regigigas doesn't appear through Mirage spots, but instead now appears in Island Cave after you've caught Regice. Except to make it appear, you have to bring the 3 golems with you, which is fair enough. It was like that in the older games too, but you have to nickname Regice and give it a cold item to hold. What? That's so oddly specific. It's almost like Game Freak are parodying all those rumors that people would spread on how to get Mew or Celebi in your game. It's great. Okay, so here's some quickfire stuff to finish off. It's absolutely not everything because I'm just one person writing this video, but it's everything I noticed. Now you can actually get both bikes at once if you advertise to 3 specific NPCs around Hoenn. Mount Chimney doesn't have any trainers that appear after the whole evil team stuff anymore. Game Freak realised that holding your breath underwater didn't make a lot of sense, so now you have to wear the Devon scuba gear. There are now trainers underwater, and Pokeballs throw in slow motion there. You can now encounter Pokemon in the Lily Cove hideout. You can't skip Fort Tree Gym anymore. All the contest halls are the same size. You can now play the game in any language you want. Sea routes now have signposts. The order of the red and blue orbs in the story is swapped around. Since Generation 4, the in-game time has been based off the DS clock, so you don't have to set your own clock at the beginning of the game anymore. Pokedex Diplomas have been redesigned and they look gorgeous. Wait a sec, are they wearing leis? Seriously? There's also a new diploma that you get if you transfer a Pokemon from Ruby, Sapphire, or Emerald to Oras. Wally's house has a 2nd floor now. You can ride bikes and tall grass. The whole Mr. Briny cutscene only plays out the first time now, and all subsequent trips will just skip all that. Your room has a Wii U instead of a GameCube. You can water multiple berry plants at once. There are no borders in this game. And the single most important change. Where did my bathing grannies go? So the series is complete for not even a week or 2. This took so long because I tried to do it on the side of a load of other projects and that just turned into me not touching it for 3 months. This is my new longest trivia video. It kicked even Gen 5's video up the top spot. I had to do the audio for this thing in 5 parts. And even then I probably missed a bunch of things, but again, I'm just one person making this video, so I did my very best. I'm just glad that I got it done before Let's Go. Thank you for the fan art again. I love each and every piece. See you when Let's Go comes out. Okay, bye.